And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, episode 15. And I got my work cut out for me this time. You know, I had it pretty easy on the last one. I had Quintorius, which really isn't a very underwhelming commander at all. Zerlin of the Claw, which I think is a really great commander. Doesn't have a lot of decks, though, for some reason. This week, though, I got my work cut out for me. We're starting out at number 3 with Ishan's Shade. 3 black, black, black. Shade Knight 5/5 and has protection from white. So that's it. That's all we have to work with. It's a 6 mana 5/5 that has protection from white. Now, as I say all the time, when you're building a deck with an underwhelming commander, you always got to look at that creature type, and our commander is a Shade and a Knight. The Knight part is definitely one that we can focus on a little bit. You could almost go a Knight Tribal, mono black Knight Tribal with this deck if you wanted to. Black Lance Paragon is a good one. 1 and a black human Knight, 3/1 with flash. When it enters the battlefield, target Knight gains death touch and lifelink until end of turn. So give that to our commander. Now our commander is going to be a 5/5 lifelink and death touch. I think you probably would go a little bit more of a Voltron strategy with this possibly. So maybe a Voltron strategy, maybe more Knight Tribal. There's a fair amount of Knight support in mono black. The best, of course, being Hakon Stromgald Scourge. Here's that card again, and I think this is probably an auto include. I mean, you may cast Knight spells from your graveyard, so this just gets around commander tax for our commander, right? I think you're definitely going to want to put this in this deck for sure. Building around the protection from white, though, is also something that I think you definitely want to look at. And the best way to do that is by changing the color of other things, right? Distorting Lens, for example, is definitely a card that I think you want to put in this deck. 2 mana artifact, target permanent becomes the color of your choice until end of turn. So now you can just make other things white, right? You don't have to rely on your opponent playing white. You can just turn your opponent's creature white. Now it can't block your Ishan's Shade. Or if they're attacking, you can do the same thing in reverse, make their creature white, and now your commander can block and it won't take damage. But if you really wanted to, you could build the entire deck around Painter's Servant, right? If you put Painter's Servant in this deck, now everything you can turn white, and you can go that strategy. And this is what I did for one of my patrons. One of the patron decks I did was basically a Painter's Servant deck, because he wanted to use the card Seed Time. It's one of his favorite cards. He wanted that to be in the deck, and I thought, well, why don't I just make everything blue? And that was that deck. It was, I get my Painter's Servant, I make everything blue, makes my Seed Time a lot better, and I put a whole bunch of cards in there that are basically hating on blue. You could do the same here, where I get my Painter's Servant, and obviously, as we know in black, there's a lot of ways to get your Painter's Servant into your hand, make everything white, and now I can hate on white, and there's lots of ways in black to do that. You could also throw cards in like Persecute, 2 black, black sorcery, choose a color, and of course we'll choose white. Target player reveals their hand and discards all cards of that color. So of course they're going to discard their whole hand with that. Tasabo's Assassin is another one that I mentioned on my 10 cards video that would be great here. 2 black, black. Phyrexian Zombie Assassin, 1/1. You can tap it to destroy target creature if it shares a color with the most common color among all permanents or tied for the most. And of course everything's going to be white, so this just becomes tap, destroy any creature. So you really could lean into the Painter's Servant strategy. And of course your commander has protection from white, so it wouldn't be able to be blocked by anything. It wouldn't be able to be targeted by anything. It's going to be protected from a lot of stuff. The downside there being you won't be able to equip it, because all of your equipment's going to be white and you can't equip with that. So there's a downside there as well, although it definitely is a strategy. So if I'm building this deck, I'm going with either a Voltron strategy, a Knight Tribal strategy, or the color change strategy, leaning heavily on Painter's Servant. And you could probably do a combination of all of the above. I probably would chuck all of the cards that I mentioned in this deck. And again, because you're in mono black, you can tutor for any of them. So it's a lot easier to lean heavily on those cards. Coming in at number 2 this week is Ramses Overdark. And interestingly enough, this is a card that I just mentioned in one of my 10 cards videos recently. 2 black, black, blue, blue. So a 6 mana Dimir commander. Human Assassin, 4/3. And has a very unique, interesting ability of tap, destroy target enchanted creature. That's a really good ability. So obviously we're in a theme here where we want to be tapping our commander. So 1,000-Year Elixir's got to go in here. Lightning Greaves, right? We can equip our commander right away and then use it right away. It's going to protect it and also allow us to use that tap ability immediately. Since I'm talking about keeping an eye on the creature type of your underwhelming commander, how about we throw Scarblade Elite in here? Black Elf Assassin 2/2. Tap and exile an assassin card in your graveyard from the game to destroy target creature. So this is an interesting way that, if your commander is an assassin, if it's going to die, you just let it go to the graveyard, and then you can use your Scarblade Elite to exile it from your graveyard, which then you're going to put it back into the command zone where it would have ended up anyway, and you can just use it to destroy a creature. So that's an interesting fit here as well. But mostly we want to be building around that tap ability of destroying an enchanted creature, and we're not going to rely on our opponents to be enchanting their creatures, although we could do that. We want to be enchanting our opponent's creatures so we can destroy them. And as I mentioned in that 10 cards video where I mentioned Ramses Overdark, False Demise is really the best way to do this. 2 and a blue, aura. When enchanted creature dies, you return that card to play under your control. I think this is the theme you want to go with this deck. This is the best way to go about it. As I said in that video, I can put this on my creature, and when it dies, it comes back into play under my control, or I can put it on an opponent's creature, and when it dies, it comes back into play under my control. And of course, since I'm putting this on my opponent's creature, it's now enchanted, and now I can destroy it. And there are quite a few effects like this. Fool's Demise is another one, where when enchanted creature dies, it comes back into play under my control. And also Fool's Demise, when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, I get to return it to my hand, so I can do it again. This is probably one of the best cards in a Ramses Overdark deck. Unholy Indenture, also, black's got a lot of ways you can do this. When enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Minions Return, same thing but has flash, and when enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control, right? So we're going to be enchanting our opponent's creatures, killing them, then gaining control of them. Really great strategy for this deck. Let's throw Hateful Eidolon in here. 1 mana enchantment creature spirit 1/2 with lifelink. When an enchanted creature dies, draw a card for each aura you controlled that was attached to it. So this doesn't have to be our creature dying. It has to be a creature that has our aura on it. So any creature dying, which all the creatures we're going to be killing are going to have our auras on it. So every time we do that, we're going to get to draw a card. Fantastic fit in this deck. Dead Man's Chest is another great fit in the deck. 1 and a black aura. You can only enchant a creature an opponent controls. Great. We're going to be doing that anyway. And when enchanted creature dies, which I imagine it will be doing very quickly, you exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library, and you may cast spells from among those cards for as long as they remained exiled. So if you kill a creature with a 5 power, you're exiling 5 cards from the top of that player's library, and you get to cast those cards. Screams from Within is another fantastic one in the deck. 1 black, enchanted creature gets -1/-1. That's not going to kill a lot of creatures. However, of course, our commander can do so. And when enchanted creature dies, you can return Screams from Within from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this immediately goes back into play on another creature that we can then kill. And we always got to have a backup for our commander, and Rootwater Matriarch is a great one. 2 blue, Merfolk 2/3. Tap to gain control of target creature as long as that creature is enchanted, right? So now if we don't have our commander around, or we can do this as well, we can just enchant our opponent's creatures and then gain control of them with Rootwater Matriarch. So that's definitely an auto include in the deck. Dimir is not fantastic in the enchantment theme. However, there are cards like Skull of Orm that will get those enchantments back out of our graveyard. 3 mana artifact, and you can play 5 and tap to return target enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Crystal Chimes is another way you can do this. 3 mana artifact. You can pay 3 and tap it and sacrifice it to return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to your hand. So we're definitely going to want that in the deck. The one downside to playing a lot of auras is they keep going to your graveyard, so you need ways to be getting them back into your hand so you can reuse them. And there is a little bit more support for enchantments in Dimir colors. Blightcaster is a good one. 3 and a black human wizard 2/3. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may have target creature get -2/-2 until end of turn. That's a great fit in the deck. Those constellation cards are going to be good, like Agent of Erebos. Whenever Agent of Erebos or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you can exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So there's a great graveyard hate card that's going to fit in this deck. And Ephemia the Cacophony. 1 and a black legendary enchantment creature harpy 2/1 with flying. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile an enchantment card from your graveyard. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So that's just a great way to get value. We know there's going to be a lot of our auras going to our graveyard. Here's a way we can get some value out of them rather than just sitting there if we can't get them back. And Hakim Loreweaver, another commander that I talked about recently in one of my Underwhelming Commanders videos, is another way that you can get value out of those cards. So you have your false demise in your graveyard because you just killed your opponent's creature. I can pay blue and a blue and put that onto my hack him. And now when he dies, I will get him back. So that's another great card that can go in this deck where I can get value out of all those auras that are going to my graveyard. Really a lot of things you can do with Ramses Overdark. Really interesting commander. One of the coolest names, I think, for a legendary creature in the game. I really like that name, Ramses Overdark. Super cool, interesting ability. Only 57 decks on EDH Rec. Definitely not popular at all. Not super underwhelming. I mean, it does cost 6, and that ability is a tap ability that, you know, maybe you're going to have to wait a turn before you can use it. It's a deck that you definitely have to do some setup before you can get going, but once you get going, man, he can be great. But coming in at number 1 this week is Tuktuk the Explorer. And like I said, you guys really are challenging me this week. This is a tough one for sure. 2 and a red Goblin, 1/1 with haste. When Tuktuk the Explorer dies, create Tuktuk the Returned, a legendary 5/5 colorless Goblin Golem artifact creature token. So that's an interesting one. This is definitely a commander that I myself have never looked at before, never seen it in a game before. Only 13 decks on EDH Rec for this guy. So definitely underwhelming, definitely unpopular. What are we going to do with it? Well, you know, there's not a ton. I got to be honest. Having a 1/1 creature with haste for 3 mana is obviously not great at all. That's terrible. It is a goblin, so you could just go a goblin theme with this. That's a little boring. I want to do more. We got to use that other ability. So we want our commander to be dying, right? In order to get that 5/5 colorless goblin golem artifact creature token, we need our commander to die. We're going to need sack outlets in this deck for sure because we want our commander to be dying. Skull Clamp is probably the best one. I mean, this is just an auto include in a Tuktuk deck. It's going to kill our commander because it gives +1/-1, and then when he dies, we get to draw 2 cards. So that's a no-brainer in this deck for sure. But how do we take advantage of that? You know, just getting a 5/5 colorless Goblin Golem artifact creature is not super fantastic. And we're going to have to play around with this legendary thing here, right? Our commander's legendary and the Golem artifact token is also legendary. So we're going to have to play around with that. And with Flame Shadow Conjuring, when our commander enters the battlefield, we can pay the 1 red on this and put a token copy onto the battlefield that's a copy of our commander. Obviously, there's going to be 2 of them, so we let the token copy die, and then we get that dies trigger. So that's a way we can have our commander in play and also the token at the same time. I think that works in the deck. Lifeline is a really interesting one. 5 mana artifact. Whenever a creature dies, if another creature is on the battlefield, return the first card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So unfortunately, our opponents can use this too. So that can be dangerous. However, it works really great with our commander where, you know, there's 2 dies triggers here, right? So our commander dies and we have to make sure the lifeline trigger goes on the stack first, so that it resolves last, so that when it checks, it will see, you know, there's probably going to be other creatures in play, but if there isn't, what we want is we want our Tuktuk trigger to go first, where it's going to create that Golem artifact token, and then the lifeline will see that there's another creature in play, and our Tuktuk will come back into play. Heat Shimmer is another way we can create a token copy of our Tuktuk, and yes, it's legendary, so it will die right away, but we will get that Golem token. It's a tough one. You know, if that Golem token wasn't legendary, this would be a lot easier. Gotta throw Mirror Gallery in here, right? That's one way we can do that. If we have Mirror Gallery in the deck, the legend rule does not apply, so now we can just repeatedly make those Golem tokens over and over and over again, and Lifeline gets a lot better that way. Filden of the Third Path also gets a lot better that way. This is another card that's going to be fantastic in the deck. And the way I built this deck is I'm going to rely heavily on this, right? This is just one of those decks where there's a few cards in here that you really, really have to rely heavily on. Felden is going to be one. Mirror Gallery is going to be another. After our Tuktuk dies, goes to the graveyard, and we can pay 2 and a red and tap our Felden to create a token that's a copy of our Tuktuk. At the beginning of our next end step, it will then sacrifice and we'll get that Golem token. We can just leave our Tuktuk, our actual commander, we'll just leave it in the graveyard if we have our Felden, and we'll just repeatedly keep using this effect. Comes into play, gets sacrificed. That's what makes Feldon so great, is he has that sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step instead of an exile effect. So we can just sacrifice our token that we make of our commander, get the golem. And if we have the mirror gallery in play, again, just like with the lifeline, we can keep doing this over and over and over again and making more and more golem tokens. I got Imperial Recruiter in the deck so that we can go get our Feldon with it. You know, there's not a lot of tutor options in mono red. This is why I make videos like my colorless tutor options, which I put a few of those in this deck as well, so that we can go get some of these cards that we really need. Skyship Weatherlight is one of them, right? When it enters the battlefield, we can search our library for any number of artifact and or creature cards and exile them and use Skyship Weatherlight to pay for and put it into our hand. So that's going to be great in the deck to get some of these really important pieces we need, like Feldon or Mirror Gallery. Forsaken Monument's going to be fantastic in this deck. 5 mana legendary artifact. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. Those tokens that we are making are colorless, right? So they're all going to get +2/+2. Now they're 7/7s. That's pretty fantastic. They're also goblins, so any goblin support we can throw in here as well. That's going to pump our goblin team. Goblin Welder's an interesting one as well. You can tap it and choose target artifact player controls and target artifact card in that player's graveyard, and then essentially swap them. And those goblin golem tokens we are making are artifacts. So now if we're making a whole bunch of those artifact tokens, we can now sacrifice one of them to get one of our really important artifacts, like our Forsaken Monument or our Mirror Gallery, back out of our graveyard and put it back into play. It's difficult. There's a lot of hoops you want to jump through here. Where do we have our Mirror Gallery in play? If we do, then we can go a certain way with this deck. If we have our Feldon, we can go a certain way with this deck. Maybe we want to go a different way depending on the cards we have in play. Regardless of what we're doing though, Warstorm Surge and Terror of the Peaks are both going to be fantastic in the deck, because whenever we create those 5/5 tokens, they're going to be dealing 5 damage to any target. That's fantastic. So any of the ETBs that we're doing here, we're going to have a lot of them, where we're going to be creating token copies of our Tuktuk, or we're going to be creating golem tokens. Whichever one it is, we're going to be having a lot of creatures entering the battlefield, and we're going to have a lot of creatures dying. Pashilic Mons is a great fit in this deck, because whenever Pashilic Mons or another goblin you control dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. So our commander dying all the time is going to deal 1 damage to any target. Our token also dying is a goblin, and it's going to deal 1 damage to any target. We can also pay 3 and a red and sacrifice a goblin to create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. So again, we can sacrifice our commander to this ability or the token to this ability. Also, Stalking Vengeance and Vicious Shadows are going to love all of the creatures dying all the time, right? Whether it is we're sacrificing our commander or our token, or we are creating those legendary copies all the time that are then going to immediately die, right? Again, if we don't have our Mirror Gallery, this strategy is going to work a lot better for us, where we're creating another legendary golem, but we already have a one in play, so one of them immediately dies. That's okay, because Stalking Vengeance is going to deal damage equal to its power to target player, so that's going to be great. And Vicious Shadows, whenever a creature dies, you may have Vicious Shadow deal damage to target player for each card in that player's hand. So both of these cards are really going to love all of the dice triggers that we're going to be getting over and over and over again. And again, you know, the lifeline, if we have that in play, now we can keep sacrificing over and over and over again. It's just really going to depend on what we're doing. You know, the legendary thing really plays a huge part here, where if we don't have Mirror Gallery in play, obviously we create a token copy and one of the legends is immediately going to die, but maybe that's a good thing because we have these other effects in play that want our stuff to be dying. It's a lot of hoops to jump through. This is definitely an underwhelming commander, no question about it, but I'm trying to take advantage of that ability as much as I can. So you are either doubling up on legendary creatures and therefore getting lots of dice triggers, even more dice triggers than you normally would, which can be good if you have something like a Stalking Vengeance in play. Even if they're dying, they're still entering the battlefield, so Warstorm Surge is going to be great there. Or we have our Mirror Gallery in play, which means that we can just keep sacrificing our Tuktuk over and over again and creating more and more of those golem tokens, and we will have a giant Tuktuk the Return turned golem army that we can attack with and give them all +2/+2 with our Forsaken Monument. Really interesting deck, really interesting commander. I think this is a pretty good one. I really do. You know, there's definitely a lot you got to work around here in order to make this work. But ultimately, I think I made a very interesting, fun deck here. The deck list for this is in the description below. Give it a whirl if you want. The poll for the next Underwhelming Commanders video is also in the description below. Make sure you go vote. And if you like the way I build decks, I got a Patreon. The link for that is in the description as well. I do all my patron deck techs on there. I do all my deck doctor videos on there. And I've started doing gameplay on there as well. You know, I'm sort of trying to transition into doing gameplay. I've had my channel for almost a year now, and I'm really trying to figure out how to do the whole gameplay thing. It can be challenging, but I'm going to start doing it on my Patreon and then hopefully eventually move it onto my channel. So go check out that Patreon. It, of course, helps support the channel as well. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.